I think there are a few reasons why Anthony Gordon would be very palatable to Liverpool and why Liverpool would want Anthony Gordon, why that interest hasn't gone away. Number one, I think Anthony Gordon was count as a homegrown player. Having a bit of an issue in this team now with homegrown players, considering that Trent is leaving, considering we might want to sell people like Harvey Elliott. There are a number of young guys who we've gotten rid of, moved on recently, or just, want to go to pastures new, that mean that Liverpool need to have that quota fulfilled. And it's probably worth, let's be honest, having some of your great players fulfill that. Now, I get it. There is obviously a thought process that, you just fill up all these parts as well, and you just sort of pay for what you need. Finding, especially at the top level, premium homegrown players, I think Frimpong might count as one. I think obviously Harvey Elliott counts as one. Curtis Jones counts as one. You're looking at, does Connor Bradley count? There's a number of players that will probably count as homegrown at this point in this Liverpool team. But with people like Trent moving on and with our quota it's closer than you think in terms of, how many players we need in the team and how many players we actually have in the team. We can't go over that. We can't go the other way and sign more foreign or outside of homegrown players and fulfill that quota until we fulfill the other side of it. So Anthony Gordon will be incredibly valuable to Liverpool, and that is also why there is a premium on the price of Anthony Gordon as well. But there is concern around the fact that Anthony Gordon, overall, he's had a good time at Newcastle, but has he been outstanding? There have been seasons where he's certainly performed to a high standard. I think broadly, the things that you buy Anthony Gordon for are A, like playmaking, B, positioning and his multi-positional sense. He predominantly plays off the left, where allegedly Luis Diaz might be the kind of guy who would want to leave Liverpool this summer or might be a target for someone like Barcelona. And then on the other side of it is he's also fantastic at getting back in defending. He's very good in a press. His size is fantastic. His goal scoring is very good. Although I've got to admit, this season he's performed in a very average sense. His XG was 8. His return was 6. Previous season, goals 11, XG 10. Broadly, he kind of fulfills, what you want. I'd imagine that there's a chart somewhere in Liverpool's backroom that says, is this guy going to outperform? Does he have an incredibly high ceiling? Is he worth closer to 100 if we pay 80 for him? What are we getting? We're getting market value. We're getting above market value for this kind of guy. And at the same time, what kind of performances are we going to get out of Anthony Gordon once he arrives? Well, first of all, you're going to get great combination with other players. You're going to get a player who is very much in combination with whoever's in the centre there, be that someone like maybe, would you necessarily get Florian Wirtz and Anthony Gordon? If we have an incredibly lucky summer, then yes. But part of me feels that Florian Wirtz is a bit of a smoke. I'm surprised I've not heard the word smokescreen more surrounding Liverpool and Wirtz more recently. But we've heard these things. I'm surprised, really, that we're not hearing more about Liverpool basically smoke screening in order to get someone like Anthony Gordon, in order to get some other people out of Europe and into Liverpool or, from other locations. Anthony Gordon feels very much like an FSG signing. He certainly fulfills the profile. He's a Scouser, young Liverpool fan. Obviously comes from the city, has great friendships with people like Curtis Jones. We'll probably broadly fit the no bad guys kind of profile in the squad. Apparently last summer was walking around the England camp and sort of saying, hey, I'm already on my way to Liverpool, which as much as he seems very committed to Newcastle, has signed that new contract. You'd imagine that is to get Newcastle a lot of the value that they were talking about at one point. And then on top of that, I also think he's someone who I look at and I think, wow, what is it that Liverpool could turn him into? There is an incredibly high threshold for Anthony Gordon. I think he's one of England's players who, in terms of playmakers, in terms of what we can potentially get from him and out of him, he's really exciting. He plays in a Newcastle side who don't play similar football to Liverpool, but he plays in a position that he'd be similar to where Liverpool would want him to play, right? Not only that, but I think a lot of people look at him and think, have you been underutilized by Everton, by Newcastle, by all these different guys? And the answer broadly, by the way, is yes. Liverpool will be going into this off-season not only thinking about international signings such as Wirtz, but also looking at fulfilling these, how can we fulfill our potential for the next 5 to 6 years? How can we build a squad that we don't need to change every 2 or 3 years? That was the goal under Klopp. That was the goal Previously, under Brendan Rodgers, they wanted to buy long-term prospects. They wanted to buy people that would subvert the market. And I think broadly, you could argue that Anthony Gordon fulfills the European elements, the kind of, people talking about playing this PSG style. I don't think it's going to be literally playing like PSG. I think it is going to be looking at what it is that we can do in terms of wingers who have incredibly good close control, can change game states, can change their own play style to fit into everything else. But also on top of that, looking at the way that Liverpool will adapt. We're not going to play Anthony Gordon like a Mane, and I think a lot of people want to play Anthony Gordon like a Mane. Broadly, the role of Mane was to play off a Firmino, and broadly the role of Salah was to play off a Firmino. What we're looking at now is that possibly you look at Salah, Wirtz, Gordon. That's a much more fluid, I mean, it's very fluid under Klopp, but it's a much more fluid front line when you then add Frimpong, Kirkes, all these kind of guys. And suddenly you've got a lot of people who can interchange positions, Anthony Gordon cutting inside, those kind of things. And you can see an adaptability that arguably is very desirable in the Premier League. A lot of other teams have signed players who may not have fulfilled that potential. Trossard might be one of those players. Martinelli might be one of those players. Foden is certainly one of those players. City at one point were looking at Florian Wirtz to be one of those players. And I think you can attribute the fact that Liverpool want adaptable guys. It's very cliche to say a Dutch manager wants players who can play anywhere. But it is accurate to say that Arne Slot will want players who can shift away the game state from where it is. So, what I'm looking at is, if I've got Gakpo on and I bring on Gordon, what am I changing? If I've got Gakpo on, or I've got Diaz on, and I bring on Alvarez or Wirtz, what am I changing? Not to have the same pieces. I think that's broadly why Liverpool got Chiesa. I think it's why they kept Elliott. I think they also kept Elliott because they sold the young kid who was a friend of his. Off the top of my head, I can't remember his name. Went to Brentford. Didn't go well. It didn't go bad. Didn't go well. And then they wanted people who could change the game. If you look at all of Liverpool's front line, the only one that really doesn't have a rotation at the moment is Mo Salah. And even then, you can make the argument that maybe Anthony Gordon could be, an adaptable backup. But even then, I think he's really a left winger come central midfielder, a centre attacking midfielder. He will change Liverpool's options out on that wing, excuse me, because broadly, he's a combination player with other players. Yes, I think the Diaz story has run its course at Liverpool. I think we've seen a lot of evidence to suggest that he wants to move to La Liga. And I think a lot of people have said, well, why would you move on? He's been great. Yes, he's been very good. I think he's been of a decent standard. But I think my bigger issue with Diaz has broadly been, there have been some big moments, and I think we've seen other players perform, and I was looking for Diaz to kind of mirror that level of performance, should we say? And actually he hasn't done that. I think if you get the feeling that if you bring in Anthony Gordon, if you bring in just any of the number 10s that we're listed against, Xavi Simons, Cherki, and Wirtz, you're going to be upping the level of Salah or whoever plays out in that left wing. And then we're looking at how someone like Gordon will enhance the game of people around him. I think Gordon has broadly enhanced the game of, you could say he's been great in combination with a Tonali or Bruno Guimaraes or Joe Linton or any of those guys. Liverpool will be looking at that midfielder that plays just tucked inside that winger and thinking, what is it that we can do with those guys to enhance their level of play? Diaz has been good. What could you do if you played Gordon, Kirkes, McAllister probably next season? Gordon, Kirkes, Soboslai as a deep-lying playmaker on the left. All of those things say to me that Liverpool are moving more towards the Arne Slot style of football, which moves away a little bit from, I think broadly the principles are the same, but the actual application and the rough and tumble of what Klopp did, a little bit different. We want a bit more control. Anthony Gordon certainly is a control player. He's certainly someone who can play very well with the ball at his feet. And then on top of that, we've also got a player who will grow into that. At this point, we're looking at a player in Anthony Gordon, and, it fits all those things that we spoke about on the podcast with Ian Graham, 24, moving into his best years. So he is about to come into his best years. Decent height, very good physically, rarely injured, though has had a couple of injury stints this season in November and in February. but broadly performs to a very good level. It's dropped away more recently at Newcastle, I've got to admit, and I think that's probably left a bit of a taste in people's mouths that, oh, well, do we really want to sign him? But could you not make a similar argument for a Luis Diaz, someone like that? I think Diaz technically is maybe a little bit better than Gordon, but creatively, I think Gordon is a higher output, and in combination, I think he's higher output. Tactically, I think they're probably both very similar. They both read the game pretty well. You'd argue the application maybe of Diaz is a little bit better. But then that's maybe also just because we've seen them in this team. Attacking wise, I think they both have almost an equal amount to contribute. And I think, give or take 10 million, we're probably looking at similar value for both those players. But I'm looking at a guy who's 24, and then I'm looking at, what's Diaz's age? Luis Diaz is 28. You're always just looking to start someone at the start of the process rather than at the end. Let me know what you guys think. Broadly, I think Liverpool are on the money with trying to sign someone like Anthony Gordon. Would we like to maybe get him a little bit earlier? Yes. Is it a dream move for him? Probably. Would Newcastle probably have some PSR issues? Were a few people going to have PSR issues come the off-season? Yes. Will it probably hinge on what happens this weekend? We'll see. I think we'll see the extent as to what Newcastle have to do in the coming weeks. I think Anthony Gordon is adaptable enough that he can play in multiple different roles. And I think that's going to be really attractive to Liverpool in this front line that we're trying to put out there. Also with the number 10 like Kirkes just behind him, and a player like McAllister or Soboslai with the intensity on the inside, I think you can replace some of those things that, similar to what Salah's doing now, where it's like, we don't want Salah to play too attacking. We don't want, too defensively. We don't want Luis Diaz to play too defensively. Bring in Frimpong, bring in Kirkes, and you take a lot of those worries and needs away. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I will be making a follow-up video should this become a little bit more of a set rumour. But also I think we are looking to change Luis Diaz out. I think probably because the club know more than we do, but let me know in the comments below. And I will chat to you guys about this if and when it develops. I'll see you later. And remember, there is Discord, there is Patreon, and I will be in that super chat down there. See you guys in a little while. Much love.